Welcome in, Todd. Are you at least 18 and do you believe in the biblical Christmas story?
Yes, I am. And yeah, the way it's told by the church, maybe not so much. Some of
Sure.
our little statuettes that we see around the season kind of conflate some of the stories and add them together where maybe they don't belong. But yeah,
Sure.
um,
Okay.
just to start
So,
off, I wanted to say I really appreciate. I got actually you showed up on my feed, my YouTube feed, about 3 or 4 days ago, and I really appreciate your patience with people more than anything. I
thanks, Todd.
the some of the people and the vitriol that comes your way from people who are claiming to love the Lord. It's pretty intense, and I just want to appreciate, like, shout out to you. Your patience is huge. The more I've watched, I really got excited. I was like, I would love to talk to this guy. Came home from work today, turned on my YouTube, and there you were, live streaming.
Well, we
So
got it.
I thought that was really cool. I apologize for the blurry picture. My It's an old camera, and my camera has been rubbed raw by my pocket. So
That's all right. We'll get through it. So, I think the first
question
thing
though,
up. Oh, yeah, sure.
can you yeah, can you take me to the genealogy in Luke? I have always been under the impression that that genealogy pointed to Mary, where Matthew pointed to Joseph, and the that disqualification on Matthew's lineage was actually talked about by a lot of scholars, and they said, okay, yeah, that shows that he was disqualified through the line of his father, but I was under the impression that the lineage through the mother was really important. And I'm thinking the reason why I thought that was important is because Matthew was a tax collector, correct?
I mean, according to legend, yeah.
Right. According to legends, he was a tax collector. So what I understood was that the temple carried the lineages of the people. That's like a library. And then when that was destroyed by the Romans, then the Israelites or Jewish people switched over to a matriarchal lineage. Um, and then I was show people said, hey, this kind of goes back and fulfills Genesis, where the curse in the garden was that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent, right? And so that female lineage was interesting. So I just was curious if you'd take me back to the one in Luke, how that didn't point to Mary. So
Yeah, so I would say two things. So, the emphasis on knowing about your mother's descent is only to determine if you're Jewish. So if you're born to a Jewish woman, you're Jewish. When it comes to determining which tribe you're from, that is only patrilineal. So you can only know your tribe by knowing your father and your father's father and your father's father. That being said, let's look at Luke. In Luke 3:23, it says Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his work. He was the son, as was thought, of Joseph of Heli, son of Mathat, son of Levi, son of Melchi. So what we have in Luke is a list of sons that start at Joseph. Joseph, the son of
going
Heli.
backward,
We don't have
going
anything from
backward.
Mary. Yeah.
Okay,
Hey, what do
so
you make of
that
the
is
what do you make of the apocryphal thing where there are names given for Mary's parents, Joachim and Anne.
Mm. Yeah, in the proto-evangelism of James, is that where it's at?
I'd have to look it up, but yeah, that sounds probable.
I think so. The infancy narratives, I think, are fun because they try to fill in a lot of the gaps from the Bible, and some of them become kind of important. So, like the infancy gospels, are where you get this idea of Mary's perpetual virginity. It's where you get the idea that Mary was 13 when she had Jesus. It's where we get like the Immaculate Conception from. So they are kind of important, but they just never rose to the level of canonicity. So could it possibly be portraying the actual parents of Mary? Maybe, but unfortunately, I don't really have any way of knowing other than, I mean, I know that the proto-evangelism of James is pretty early. Um, so I think it has as good of a chance as being true as the Gospel of Luke does, to be fair.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah,
But
I thought that was going down. So thank you.
one thing you might want to check out too, Todd. So in the genealogy of Luke, we find some other kind of interesting problems. So we have in Matthew, the genealogy goes back to Solomon, the son of David. But unfortunately in Luke, it doesn't do that. It goes to Nathan, the son of David, and the promise of the throne was always through Solomon. So if you go to Chronicles and Samuel, God promises to extend the kingly lineage through Solomon. So going through Nathan is just kind of a useless lineage at that point. I mean, it could establish that you have blood, but it's not really the proper line per se if you want to be a king.
So is Solomon in that lineage though?
No, not at all. Not in Luke.
Okay, thank you.
So like,
I
you know, we
will-
talk a little bit about the New Testament documents. We would say use of the Old Testament. And this is one of the reasons why I think mythicism is so popular right now, because when you're looking at the New Testament, it seems pretty clear that who's ever writing it, they're not really all that familiar with the Hebrew Bible. Like they clearly have a copy of it in Greek, and they clearly are familiar with some of the concepts, but like it's quite clear that they're novices, right? And they keep making all these blunders. And I assume that the reason why this would be is because they probably weren't proper Jewish men and women, whoever was writing, or they weren't Jewish at all. Maybe they were on the fringes of society, or maybe they were like Jewish proselytes, people who converted to Judaism prior to converting to Christianity. But what it seems clear is it certainly seems clear that they weren't really familiar with the Hebrew Bible.
You know, that brings up an excellent point. It actually takes me back to one of the first videos I saw of yours. And it made me think, you had pointed out, you said, here's a prophecy that someone is quoting. And they went back and they said, here, this is a prophecy of Jeremiah. But the actual quote that they used was a mix of someone, I think, from Micah and from Jeremiah, right? So I was dying to
Yeah.
ask you the question, would you have felt better if that person, whoever wrote it, had just said, as quoted or has written by the prophets, and then separated out these two statements, or if they had had the wherewithal to actually say Jeremiah and Micah, and if our modern translators didn't accidentally put quotes around two separate quotes, thinking it was one, but would you have been more impressed by it if he had left the name off, or if he had added both names, but somehow only catching one name from memory, kind of kicks it out with the bathwater, so to speak? Does that make sense?
So I think he would have been better off either A, not naming the prophet, and just saying prophets in the plural, or B, naming both of them properly. What I don't find convincing is naming Jeremiah as both of them when one comes from Zechariah 11. So, and my understanding is this. So, like, I actually think that some of these passages, like, so while the author was writing these or adding them in later, I think he was probably quoting some stuff that either he had in his memory from reading prior or that somebody told him. Because if he actually had a copy of the Greek Septuagint with him, of all the different prophets, the author would have went back to check. Like, it seems weird that they would just get it wrong. But you
Right.
would get it wrong a lot if you were trying to remember a quotation that sounded vaguely familiar to something else. It's like we see in Mark chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, there's a quote attributed. First half is Malachi, second half is Isaiah 40. He attributes both of them to Isaiah. They're similar sounding quotes. So you can see why he might give them both the same author, because they sound so similar. But in reality, they're two different quotes. This is what you would expect for somebody who, A, is working on some sort of oral memory, or somebody who is so poor with the manuscripts that they can't even bother to read them. I find it weird that somebody would take the time to write the gospel, but then be too lazy to check their copy of the Greek Septuagint to see if they got the right author. I think it's more likely that they were going off memory, or they were going off of like, well, I asked so and so and they told me this.
Right. Or like if I'm so excited to say something that I end up only quoting one of my sources, but by saying, oh yeah, he's one guy went out and he was supposed to buy a potter's field. The other one says, here's the 30 pieces of silver, throw it to the potter, but it all has to do with the potter. And I'm so excited to tell my story that I kind of screw it up in the writing. And I only have one giant piece of parchment, and those are expensive. And apparently if I screw it up, I have to throw it away. Right.
Right.
So I can definitely see that. So that made me think of like, so in your understanding, Paul, who wrote the epistles, was he a real person, at least in your understanding?
I think Paul was a real person. My reading of Paul is I think he's a little bit out of his mind. I think this is a guy who is deeply, deeply sincere about what he's doing, but is like super over the top dogmatic. This is a guy that, according to his own words, was going out rounding up and persecuting Christians, which means already we've got a guy who's okay with violence, he's okay with extremism, and this is a guy that seems to be a little more on the extreme end of his belief system. And then I think maybe he
Right.
did actually have an experience where he fell off his horse, bumped his head, had a near-death experience. Maybe because he had so much grief over persecuting Christians, he had like a Christian near-death experience, and then spent the rest of his life trying to make sense of it.
Interesting. Okay, so back to what we were just talking about. If Paul was in exile on the island of Patmos, he was in prison.
Oh, John.
The things that he wrote, right? Those things
John
that he,
was on
wherever he was
Patmos.
in prison. Who was?
John was on Patmos.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, Paul did get in prison, but yeah, that was John.
But if Paul was writing, he may not have had copies of the scriptures, and he may have been writing from memory on certain things.
I agree.
So that was the thing. So let's go down your list. The virgin birth. So here's an interesting thing. I went through an experience when I was really, really young. When I was about 8 years old, I saw a holographic hand appear above my mom's head. She was singing a song, and I saw this three-dimensional holographic, glowed like television, high-end technology kind of thing. And it was a hand holding a vase, wide mouth, narrow neck, wide bottom. And I heard, kind of imparted into my mind, I heard, I'm anointing your mom's head with oil. And I didn't know what that meant. Started crying. My mom said, oh, I'm sure if I looked over your head, I would have seen something too, right? But I drew a little picture of it, and I didn't remember, I forgot about it. 10 years later, when I was going off to college, I was looking for something in my mom's Bible, and I found this piece of paper, and I was like, oh my God, that was real, right? Like it wasn't a dream. So it blew my mind. So something, the backstory of that is my mom had been raped before she was married, and doctor said she was barren. So she found Christ at the Jesus People movement out here in California, and got on her knees and said, God, if you give me a son, I'll give him back to you. And she was pregnant with me her next cycle. So they got there's like a heavy load laid on me as a kid, right? So when so out here in California, 909 area code and 714 area codes are right here, right? Well, I fell away from God. I had all kinds of prophecies and stuff. People said things over me. I didn't know what they meant, and they were all kind of sounded discombobulated. But in 2007, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and he wasn't understanding anything I was saying. And I said, God, what do I need to do? What do I need to do so that my friends know what I know and see what I've seen, right? And it started this like roller coaster. The idea, this idea of the virgin birth. So I started asking God questions, right? And he would have numbers pop up. And those numbers like 714 came up. And I was like, why is this number? Synchronicities. People talk about it all the time because we're living in the matrix, right? The synchronicities are popping up. And I'm like, what does this number mean? And he goes, look up 714 in Isaiah. 909 area code, 909. It's 9 at night, right? Look up Zechariah 9:9. So I started getting these little tidbits like stones. The number 444 led me to Micah 5:1. That number took me to these places. So the thing that I don't understand, or that I've been shown. Here, my best one, and maybe this will give me a background. I was sitting outside of a Caro's here in Costa Mesa, and I was about to meet a pastor who was going to kick me out of his church. I had my Bible with me, and I said, God, what do you want me to read before I meet this guy? And he said, look across the street. The address on the building across the street was 3422 Bristol, right? Now I Google map 3422 Bristol and it's not there. It's down the block. But apparently I did it just a couple days ago. 3422 Bristol, South Bristol was across the street. But I went back and sat at that Caro's and looked, and those numbers weren't there. But he said, look up Ephesians 3, verse 4 through 22. Ephesians 3, verse 4 says, in reading this, you'll understand the mystery of Christ. And there is no verse 22 in Ephesians 3. Ephesians 4:1, which would be the 22nd verse, says, now knowing this, live a life worthy of the calling you've been given, right? So what happened to me was I started reading it and I got to verse 10. The understanding of like, oh yeah, his intent, the mystery is that the Jews and Gentiles are heirs to God. We're all children of God together. But his intent in verse 10 was that the rulers and leaders in heavenly places would understand the nature of God through Christ, to understand who God was. This idea that we live in a holographic universe, that if God was going to try to prove his nature, then he would enter the hologram with us. He would put on an avatar. He had the cheat codes like all of our video gamers do now. They have the cheat codes, respawn ability, unlimited resources for their friends, right? The term in the Bible, it says the young maiden will be with child. It's just a descriptive thing. Maybe the young maiden applies to Israel. Maybe all these messianic scriptures apply to the people as a corporate, right? But it was understood that if you were a young maiden and you weren't a virgin, that was a punishable by stoning after you got married, right? And if you take all of
Well,
these corporate prophecies,
it kind of
if you
depends
take the
on the
corporate, I'll finish,
circumstances.
right?
Yeah,
So if you
you would
take
have
the
to
prophecies
claim
about
virginity.
corporate, yeah, but if you take the
Like the
prophecies
punishment
about
of
the
Deuteronomy
corporate,
is if she
then
claims to be a
Jews
virgin.
are looking for. I'm sorry.
So the punishment in Deuteronomy is if she claims to be a virgin.
Exactly. It was scary to not be a virgin if you were a young young maiden. That's my point. I've read some or I've listened to Jewish scholars
Mhm.
that say that word does mean virgin. So
Well,
that's a
let's.
semantic. It's a word. But I'll finish my point. The idea is that if the Jews and all of these prophecies are about the corporate Israel, then why is Israel even today looking for the Mashiach? Why are they looking for a single person to come and do all these things? If it is all about just Israel, and it's not, we can't place any stock in the typology that says, oh, there was a Passover lamb. We're looking forward to a new Passover lamb. That there was an exodus into a new homeland, that Yahshua is going to lead us into the promised land. These stories that have all kind of linked to the Messianic story. So that's
Sure. So I would say two things. I think when it comes to like seeing visions and things like that, I don't put too much stock in it for two reasons. One, because like if God cares so much about giving somebody a special vision, then he should be feeding the 3 million starving children every year. And that seems to be a pretty big oversight that God would like give somebody a vision of comfort, but then not feed the starving children, especially in Matthew 6, because he says, not even worry about what you'll eat or what you'll drink or what you'll wear, because God will take care of it because he takes care of the birds. But the reality is, children, even Christian children, are dying of starvation as we speak. So the other thing I would say is I'm actually pretty familiar with people who see things that don't happen or that don't really exist. Case in point, my mother. And if you're watching this, Mom, I love you, but you have to understand that you say things that aren't real. And so the thing of it is, like, my mother used to tell people when I was a child that my sister Tracy had a disease that allowed her to walk on walls and ceilings. And she still believes to this day that my sister has a disease that allows her to defy gravity and walk on walls and ceilings. And she claims that she witnessed it. She also will swear on her grave that when she was in high school on the swim team, that she swam 500 miles a week for practice, even though it is quite literally physically impossible to do so. So I think people's brains are this mysterious box sometimes that causes people to believe things or see things that simply don't exist. And most people aren't really capable of knowing if they're seeing or experiencing something real. I've got a good friend named Morgan. Morgan spent years having what we would call like psychotic breaks before his friends and families figured out that he was having psychotic breaks and was able to get the right medication for it. And the reality is, when you're having these experiences, to you, they're always real and you can always connect the dots. But to the other people around you, they're not real. And it turns out it's difficult to know if what's happening to you is real or not real. Now, that being said, I really like this prophecy of Isaiah 7, and I would love to dig into it a little bit with you if you're interested.
Sure.
Okay. So Isaiah 7 is an interesting prophecy because I think, if anything, of all the prophecies about Jesus, this is one that I don't think the translation has to matter that much. Now, I think it does matter, but I don't think it has to. People have spent a lot of time worrying about the translation, but even if you think that it's translated correctly as the virgin will conceive, I still don't think it gets you to Jesus. So the context is in verse 1 of 7, says, "In the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and King Pekah, son of Remaliah of Israel, went up to attack Jerusalem but could not conquer it." So there's an attack against the Judean kingdom, and King Ahaz is shaken in his boots because he's possibly going to get replaced by somebody else, because the northern Israelites and the Arameans have made an alliance, and they're trying to put a king on the throne that's more favorable to their alliance. So that's kind of the setting. Isaiah goes to him, gives him an initial prophecy, trying to shore up his faith, and then he goes back, and then God sends him a second time in verse 10. And it says, "Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, saying, Ask a sign of the Lord your God, and let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test." Okay, so far, what we learn here is that God is telling Ahaz, ask a sign from me, I'll do it for you. Obviously, because he wants to shore up his faith. And Ahaz is feigning like this fake piety. He said, no, I won't put the Lord to the test. So this upsets Isaiah and God. Then Isaiah said, "Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary mortals, that you weary my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel." So right off the bat, the Hebrew text um, just says that she's already pregnant and she's going to bear a child. Ha'amah means the young woman, and the adjective after it, hara, means to be pregnant. So she's a pregnant young woman in the Hebrew text. But let's just imagine for a second that the Hebrew text is wrong. Let's say the Greek text got it right, and there's a manuscript error in the Hebrew, and the Hebrew got corrupted. It should say the virgin will conceive. Okay. But even if this is the case, it still doesn't entail that a virgin is giving birth. Because as it turns out, virgins do conceive all the time. First time you have sex as a virgin, you run the risk of conceiving. I know, because my sister-in-law got pregnant on her honeymoon the very first, right away. So virgins do in fact conceive. It's a real thing. Now, do virgins give birth? No, virgins don't give birth, but they do conceive. So I don't think that gets you to Jesus. And the context continues about this child. It says, "He shall eat curds and honey by the time he knows how to refuse evil and choose good. For before the child knows how to refuse evil and choose good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted." So, I mean, the reality is, it's a prophecy for the days of King Ahaz. And he says, the two kings that are attacking you, they're going to get wiped out before this child is old enough to know right from wrong, which means everything about this prophecy is clearly a sign for King Ahaz while King Ahaz is alive.
That I wasn't there. Fair enough. You can definitely layer that through. So it's a good observation. I'm not going to say no. I
Sure.
don't know enough about it, but and I don't speak Hebrew or Greek. I do want to ask you though that the name Emmanuel,
Mhm.
that does have a meaning, doesn't it? Does it have a
Yeah.
specific meaning? Doesn't it mean God with us?
Means God with us, and it appears again in chapter 8. So these are like what we would call theophoric names. Theophoric names are given to people not to describe the person they're given to, but to describe the God or what the God is doing. So all of the three children of Isaiah in chapter 7 and chapter 8 have names that describe what God is doing. And as the prophecy comes true in chapter 8, the prophet kind of cries out twice and lets you know what he meant by Emmanuel. So, as the Assyrian army is coming in and fulfilling the prophecy, it says, therefore, the Lord is bringing up against it the mighty floodwaters of the river, the king of Assyria, and all his glory. It will rise above its channels and overflow its banks. It will sweep on into Judah as a flood, and pouring over will reach up to the neck, and its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land. O Emmanuel, take notice, you people, and be dismayed. Listen, you far off countries, and gird yourselves and be dismayed. Take counsel together, but it shall be brought to naught. Speak a word, but it shall not stand, for God is with us. So Isaiah is connecting the prophecy of Emmanuel with the Assyrian invasion, because the prophecy is about how God is going to be with Judea while they're at war against the Arameans, against the northern Israelites, and against the Assyrian army, and they're going to survive all three of them.
So you asked a question earlier tonight about whether or not you could just take the cold reading of a text or if it had a deeper meaning. That seemed to sound like the river itself had wings, and I know that rivers don't have wings. Could this be one of those examples where there is other meaning in that text that someone might understand that we might not get in English?
Well, I'm not saying that authors can't use metaphors. Like when it talks about an army sweeping in like a raging river, we understand that this is like imagery being portrayed, but we also understand what's happening. An army is invading, right? And so when I'm reading this, I'm allowing the context of the passage to provide me the interpretation of the passage. And the context of the passage is that one, the people are in trouble. Two, God said he would save them. Three, the Assyrian army is going to invade. And four, God will not let you fall. He'll allow you to survive. Right? So the context to me just seems to speak for itself that this is clearly a reference to the Assyrian invasion, not something happening 730 years later.
Right. Okay. Um, I think that in basic Christian idea or in our theology, there is this idea that the disciples understood that there was going to be uh, a second coming of Christ, that Jesus was going to come once to die, and then he's going to come back again as the Lord, right? Um, and so
Mm-hmm.
these messianic prophecies, as they point to someone coming to save them physically from these threats, right? That is linked in physically, yes, at that time, but as a typology, then Jesus would do that in the spiritual sense in the future, right? So one of the questions that you are asking right now is the star, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wise men. So in the Bible, it doesn't really say that they were wise men. It just gives them the name of magi,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where
Right.
else in the Bible is the word magi used?
So the Magi typically refer to Persian astrologers.
Right? And so Daniel was elevated to chief of the Magi of Babylon, right?
Mm-hmm.
After
Yeah.
he interpreted the dreams and of Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when Daniel wrote his prophecies, one of the criteria that you had mentioned for being a prophecy is it had to be very clear and it had to be very like direct. This will happen, right? So my understanding is that Daniel chapter 9, he says, from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until Mashiach will be exactly this many years or weeks of years. And it's broken into two sections. So there are 7 years and 48 years or something. Again, I don't have it in front of me.
It's
My
7
understanding
and
is that
62.
okay, and so then they ran on a 360-day calendar at the time, and there were 3 decrees to rebuild Jerusalem, but the third one came from Artaxerxes, and according to the 360-day calendar, from the decree of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem was exactly that 62 weeks to the
Well,
day of Palm Sunday.
unfortunately,
So
that's just not
that's
true. Like I do know this
well,
talking point very well, and unfortunately, none of it's true. So there's a couple things you have to look at first. Number one, I would point you again to the context of Daniel 9. So the 490 years is critical, and the beginning of Daniel 9 tells you what the 490 years is for, and it's for their punishment. They're going to be punished for 490 years, right? It says in the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, by birth a Mede, who became king over the realm of the Chaldeans, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years according to the word of the Lord to the prophet Jeremiah that must be fulfilled for the devastation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Okay, so the question at hand right now for Daniel is, how long is the devastation? And well, according to Jeremiah 29 and Jeremiah 25, it's going to be for 70 years. So the setting here is kind of important, even if, like, I don't want to get into a discussion on Darius the Mede, but if we assume that this is the Darius we know of, this is about 522 when this is being written. So after the 70 years had already came and went. So he's obviously like, listen, you said 70 years, what gives? Why aren't we been restored? And he makes sense of this by going to the books of the law. So he says, uh, we have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by following his laws, which he set before us by his servants. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. So the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us because we have sinned against you. So that curse is in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, where it says, if you do not turn to me after I punish you, I will multiply your punishment by 7. So Daniel here is making the connection, like, oh, no, 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 we're not going to be punished for 70 years. We're going to be punished for 490 years, which is, of course, why we get the 490 years that comes later in the passage. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, if this is talking about the devastation of Jerusalem being 490 years, well, what would be the starting point? Well, the starting point would be 605. So 605 minus 490 is only 115. So we're quite a ways off from Jesus. And also, if you look at the beginning of the passage in verse 23, I don't think the word going out is a decree at all. It says, at the beginning of your supplications, meaning when you started praying, a word went out, and I have come to declare it to you, for you are greatly beloved. So the word going out is a word going out from Yahweh as a message or a prophecy, which means the previous word going out, or the next word going out, I'm reading this as being in the same way. Know and therefore and understand from the time that the word went out, meaning past tense, the word already went out, right? It says, know and therefore understand from the time that the word went out to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. So this is a reference to the prophecy of Jeremiah about the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which again is 605. So both the beginning of the passage and this part of the passage confirm that the beginning of counting needs to be 605 BCE, because that's when the word went out, and that's also the beginning of their devastation. So I'm reading this as ending in the 2nd century, just after the Antiochian crisis, because the rest of this chapter is clearly about Antiochus Epiphanes and what he did, as we read in Maccabees and elsewhere.
okay. So my understanding of that was the 70 weeks had been, or the 70 years had been factored in because that was there. And then the time from Artaxerxes until Palm Sunday. And then there was still that final 7-year period that was yet to be fulfilled. So that's my understanding. I don't have the reference for the people who had gone through it. I've seen it from multiple different people who have calculated it out. From the decrees, it's 62 weeks minus those 70 years, exactly on 360-day years to Palm Sunday. So my contention was, or my understanding, and bear with me, was that the chief of the Magi would have left his scrolls with the Magi in Babylon, so that they were looking for the Messiah to come around a specific time. And they knew that they didn't know how old he would be when he became king, but the idea, there was a planetarium, a guy who works with planetariums, and he went on his computer and backtracked it. And he said, if you were in Babylon and you were in the east of Israel, or in the east of Israel, you would have seen at that time, before Christ was born, about a year or so before Jesus was born, you would have seen the king planet Jupiter go into retrograde around Regulus, which was the king's star in Leo, and Leo was known to be the planet, the constellation for Israel, Lion of the tribe of Judah, and all that, right? So it went in retrograde around it. So in a sense, it stood still and created a very bright light in the sky. So they checked. They said a king is going to be born. With the king planet just went around the king's star in Leo. So they believe, these astrologers, like you said, believe that a king was going to be born in Israel. They went back and checked their prophecies from their chief magi and said, oh, okay, now understand, we say that it's three wise men because there were 3 gifts, but more realistically, these people are traveling from Babylon they're taking the spice road. They're taking that spice route and these trade routes, barren lands. There's probably hundreds and hundreds of people, livestock, food, supplies, guards, ambassadors, people. So it was a big convoy. It would take them time to prepare the provisions, and they estimate probably a couple of years to get to Israel. So by the time this large crowd got to Bethlehem, as they were on the spice route, about 3 years later, the same constellation retrograde with Jupiter happened again, according to this planetarium display. So when they were on the spice road coming from Babylon about 3 years later, they would have seen this bright light in the sky, call it a star, a planet, whatever you want to call it. Again, I don't speak Hebrew. They saw it stand still over Israel, and they said, oh, that's it. So then they go, according to the Bible, they go to the synagogue and they ask him, where is the Messiah supposed to be born, according to the common story? And they said he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem, according to Micah 5. Right now, how I know Micah 5, it's a crazy story, but he's going to be born in Bethlehem. So they go to Herod and say, hey, what's going on? Herod may have not been the Herod from Herod the Great, and I think it was his son. His son Herod was also named Herod. And he says, well, what was his decree? Kill all the boys 2 years old or younger, right?
Well, we do know it was
So
Herod the Great, because we learned that he died and had a son that replaced him, and we know who the son was.
Well, so that's my understanding of the Star of Bethlehem, and all that stuff. The wise men, as they call it. So feedback on that, maybe.
Yeah, so I think none of it, the problem I have is like none of it matches the text, right? So if we go to Daniel 9, it's pretty clear what's happened in Daniel 9. It says, know therefore and understand, from the time that the word went out to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem, which didn't happen under Artaxerxes. So Artaxerxes did not issue a decree to rebuild anything. Artaxerxes gave a letter to Nehemiah that granted him passage and granted him some provisions to help rebuild part of the wall. That's basically it. There was no decree for anyone.
That would be a decree. Go ahead. So
right.
That's my understanding. Yeah, go ahead. I will give you passage. I will give you. Go ahead and do it.
No, it's not a decree. It was a letter to one person.
Fair enough.
Just a personal letter.
From a king, right? But from a king.
Yeah, it's just a personal letter, not a decree. He didn't send it out to the kingdom. Like a decree gets promulgated.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But how would he guarantee safe passage if it was just a letter?
Because he had the letter with the king's seal on it.
Okay.
All right. So is it, know therefore and understand from the time that the word went out to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem until the time of an anointed prince, there shall be 7 weeks. So the first anointed prince comes after 7 weeks. This is quite clearly a reference to Joshua, the first high priest, after the temple gets established in 516-ish. For 62 weeks it shall be built again with streets and a moat, but in troubled times. Fair enough. After, and this is before Nehemiah. It says, after 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. Almost all of scholarship is under the agreement. This is Onias III. He was the high priest at this time period during the Antiochian crisis, who was killed by Antiochus, replaced with his half-brother Jason. Jason made a deal with Antiochus to end sacrifices and offerings, and then Antiochus came in, set up a statue of Zeus, and offered a pig on the altar, and cut off all the Jewish offerings for a period of 3.5 years until the Maccabean revolt. That's why it says, the troops of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, which he did. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall make sacrifice and offering cease. That's 3.5 years, just like we read in Maccabees. And in their place shall be a desolating sacrilege. Yes, that's the statue of Zeus. Until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So my reading of this text is that it's basically a linear 490 years, although I don't think his math is perfect. It's a linear 490 years that ends without any gaps. The problem we have with Christianity is they don't know who the desolator is. It says until the end is poured out on the desolator, they have no idea who the desolator is, but they typically push this out to whoever the Antichrist at the end of time is, which means you got 1 week at the very end of this that's just randomly disconnected from the rest of the weeks. But the whole point of this prophecy is that it's a linear collection of weeks starting in 605, because at the beginning of the chapter it told you. The beginning of the chapter says that this is the number of years that Jerusalem will be desolated. So, like, there's nothing in here would lead one to believe that this is talking about any type of division of weeks that have like separation between them. It's just a 490-year period. Boom.
Okay. So then here's an interesting question for you then. The Jews don't consider him to have been their Messiah, even though it fulfilled that prophecy.
I
And
didn't.
you went pretty clearly and said someone else did all of these things. So couldn't it be argued that that was an accurate prophecy that was fulfilled and therefore deserves some like pondering, even if it's not part of the Christian into the future second coming kind of stuff? But doesn't it make you pause and say, wow, all this stuff came true by someone?
That's a fair question, which is why in higher education, when I was in seminary, we had to learn how to read Greek and Hebrew. And as it turns out, the form of Hebrew that we have this prophecy in is something that didn't exist until way after the time period of Daniel. So this is in Mishnaic Hebrew, which didn't get implemented until after the Hasmonean dynasty was set up, after the fall of Antiochus. So there was a renewed, let's call it nationalist pride after the fall of Antiochus, and they reinstituted Hebrew again as the lingua franca. Did I say that right? Franca? Anyways, it became the official language again. And the funny thing is, though, like we can tell, like the vocabulary was different, some of the grammar was different, it had a lot of Aramaic influences in it. So we can tell that the form of Hebrew that this was written in matches the period after the Antiochian crisis. It doesn't match what we would expect from the time period that Daniel would have actually lived. Also, we can kind of tell when it was written because it gets a lot of stuff right up until a certain point, and then it gets stuff wrong. And so, for example, the idea, it gets the death of Antiochus Epiphanes wrong in one of the other chapters. It talks about how he dies, gets it wrong. Also, here it says that the temple is going to be made a sacrilege. And then at the end of this disaster, finally, like the true messianic age is going to come upon us, and there'll be world peace and all that stuff. And that clearly didn't come true either, right? So the reality is, and I agree with scholarship on this book of Daniel, which is that it was written in the middle of the 2nd century during the Antiochian crisis, and it operated just like a lot of apocalyptical literature, which is like, just hold on a little bit longer. It's okay. Just hold on a little bit longer. God's promises are finally going to come true. But this prophecy is definitely an ex eventu. It was written after the events already transpired, which is why it knows a lot about the 2nd century. If you read the other prophecies, it talks about, the wives of different kings, and it talks about, deals that kings are making with so and so. It gets everything right. It's really good with everything in the 2nd century, but it doesn't know anything about the time period of Daniel. It gets all that stuff wrong. It gets the kings wrong. It gets the king's children wrong. Belshazzar was not the child of Nabonidus, or not the child of Nebuchadnezzar. He was the child of Nabonidus, and they weren't even related. Nabonidus was an usurper of the throne. They had no blood relation whatsoever. But yet, on like 5 different occasions, we're told in the book that Nebuchadnezzar is the father of Belshazzar, and it just isn't true. It also calls Belshazzar a king, but he was never a king. He was a co-regent while his father Nabonidus was out on leave. That's it.
Yeah, I've heard people say that co-regents, governors, lesser kings, some of those words get conflated. I've also heard, and I want your feedback on this, that we don't have any ancient Hebrew scriptures or scrolls that are older than our oldest Greek Septuagint manuscripts, and that later, that we have to trust the idea that the scribes were carrying through before the Septuagint, to the Septuagint, and then after, but the paper has dissolved, and we just have the modern copies, which is why the Dead Sea Scrolls were so interesting, because it bridged this big 1,000-year gap between the oldest Hebrew text and the stuff we have today. But technically, the oldest documents we have are the Greek documents. Is that your understanding as well?
Unfortunately, that's not really the case. So the oldest documents that we have are, in fact, from the Dead Sea Scrolls. We do have, so it's quite clear that the Septuagint texts, the at least 6 different recensions of it that we have, it's clear that they predate Jesus, because the copies that we do have match Septuagint quotations that come from before our manuscripts. Now, do we have actual physical manuscripts of the Septuagint that are older than the Dead Sea Scrolls? No, not really. You have to triangulate kind of the age. So I classify the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, like of the Torah, as probably roughly about the same time period. So we know from the letter of Aristeas that, according to legend, during the Greek period, they brought 70 scholars, according to history, over to Alexandria to translate the Torah. That would have been in the 3rd or 2nd century. Now, what we know is it was only the first 5 books of Moses, which means all the remaining books to get translated in the Greek happened sometime after that. We don't know when. What we do know is that we got Greek and Hebrew manuscripts of the Bible, of the Old Testament, within the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a guy named Hirschman. Is it Hirschman? Give me a second. Lawrence Schiffman. There we go. Lawrence Schiffman is a scholar who studied the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he was kind enough to do a tabulation of, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, do the texts match the reading in the Septuagint, or do they match the reading in the Masoretic text? What he found was about 65% of the manuscripts that we find in the Dead Sea match with the Masoretic text with that reading. Only about 5% of them match the reading in the Septuagint, which leads me to believe, at the time period of the Dead Sea, in the first 2 centuries leading up to Jesus' birth, rather, the Masoretic text was still the most predominant text among the Jewish people. I don't think that the Greek Septuagint really became popular until until the diaspora, until the Christian movement became a real thing. I don't think it was that popular at the time at the time Jesus was born.
Yeah, I think that explains some of the differences. And people will say this, if you read the Bible, it says this passage is in, not in this, but it's in the Masoretic text. Um, so yeah, it's neat. So one of the things I think is really interesting about the Christian story and the Hebrew story is that they've kept as many of these documents as possible. So even the mistakes we still have, whereas some cultures have burned or gotten rid of anything that doesn't line up perfectly. Um, I want to end. Well, maybe I don't want to end. I love talking with you. This is fantastic.
I mean, you've been really nice to talk to.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things you've asked other people is, what's your most convincing argument for the existence of God? And I was thinking about it, the idea of a fine tuning of the Big Bang. When I love fireworks displays, they have them out here on the pier where I live, and they shoot fireworks off, and it's pretty dramatic, But every once in a while, they'll shoot one up there that looks like a happy face, and you know that there was some engineering that went into that one, right? And the idea that if there was some explosion and that explosion was so perfectly fine tuned with hot and cold spots where they were supposed to be, so that planets congealed and our periodic table of elements happened the way they did, and that somehow either life appeared in a Goldilocks zone in that explosion, or life appeared at the middle of the explosion and everything, flew away from it. Uh, to me, that sounds like a pretty strong argument for the existence of a mind behind all of this. My analogy that I give my friends is if Michelangelo had said or claimed, hey, if David was built, his statue, if he had put small explosive charges into a block of marble, pressed the button and it blew up and was a perfect sculpture, we would say that was some pretty amazing fine tuning. And the universe seems to have a lot of those elements of fine tuning. One example I think you were talking about was the idea that the universe could be cycling back on itself. And what my question I wanted to find out from you was, what is the idea that the acceleration of the universe and its expansion assumes that there's some kind of energy being added, dark energy is being added to the formula, and 0 point energy is being added. I understand it's about 60 to 70% of the energy needed for all of existence to be there to keep the electrons from falling into the protons and neutralizing. That energy is being added from somewhere outside of our reality. And so those things are making me, or they really push me towards the idea that there is a mind behind what we have, what we're experiencing, and then the ability to meditate and connect with that mind, feel like I'm getting guidance and feedback. And I've had my life saved by it. I've been healed. I had a broken bone that was healed and the doctors couldn't explain it. So these things they're interesting to me. So if I live in a universe that's not material, if it's all just energy, E equals MC squared, all matter is just energy slowed to a vibration, right? If that's true, then we could potentially live in a holographic simulation, and the creator of the game, it wouldn't be unheard of for the creator of the game to be able to enter the game himself and play it once in a while. And that's why we have these maybe stories of manifestations
I
and
think the problem I
visitations.
have I think the problem I have with the fine tuning argument is that the minute we start probing into it, you're going to start telling me excuses for why it's not finely tuned. So, for example, if I say, well, if it's finely tuned for life, then I think it's radically unexpected that 97% of the water on the planet is undrinkable poison for human beings, and that children are like, God wants you to birth all these children, be fruitful, multiply, but also upwards of like 40% of all conceived and fertilized eggs end up not making it to birth. And like we have a huge mortality rate, not so much in the Western world anymore. In the first world, we had a huge infant mortality rate and a maternal mortality rate these are radically unexpected in a world that is finely tuned. And I already know you're going to say, well, the fall. But my point is, if this is a result of the fall, then what it means is that we're not living in a finely tuned space. If we're living in a finely tuned space, then nobody has to make excuses for the parts that are not finely tuned.
That's interesting, but I'm not going to say the fall. I won't say that. I'm saying that the playground that you and I find ourselves in is finely tuned to be perfectly neutral, to allow the game to play out as it does. I've never played a video game or a simulated reality where there weren't trials, there weren't difficulties, puzzles, bad guys, people you had to shoot, because the more you played, the better you got. Your statement to me that there are millions of people that are starving because God is letting it happen is more of an indictment against me as a Christian. The people are starving because my faith is not, I'm not able to feed enough, or the people who claim to be the followers of a man who laid down his life for someone else are not stepping up, as shown by probably a lot of the viewers of the people who call into your show, how mean they are and how they just want to be right. Or maybe they've never had an experience where someone laid their life down for them and now they want to reciprocate, whether it's Jesus or someone else, maybe an orphan that gets adopted. That child then grows up and says, I want to do the same and pay it forward. The reason why our world is messed up is to give us an opportunity to help, to give um, to give
Why do
care
we
to
need help?
somebody else. You know, well, because they're starving. There are
I
people
know
that
that's
are
the
going
problem, right?
through
It's a circular
right.
problem, right? Like we need help because it's not finely tuned because it is a mess. If it wasn't a mess, we wouldn't need help. Like this virtue of like we need to help each other is only virtuous in a unfinely tuned world.
Right. So it's not heaven, right?
That's the
This isn't
problem, yeah.
heaven.
Because God could just done Revelation 21 and made the people he wanted in heaven and not made babies dying of bone cancer, things like that. And like I get this idea, like, well, man was the one who was in charge. Well, if God knew that man was going to fuck it all up, he shouldn't have put man in charge of making sure that the babies get fed. Like he should have made it so that all of the globe had abundant water and had abundant land for growing crops. He could have even made it so that the crops grew on their own and you don't even have to do any of the farming. But the method that he chose is just not a good method if in fact your goal is for humans to have any type of well-being.
If I can
That's
add one thing
assuming
to
that
that too, with the video game analogy, in a video game, there's no actual suffering, right? It's simply a game for your entertainment. But, when you talk about human life, using other human suffering to teach some other humans something is quite different. To create a world in which there has to be suffering and to use suffering to teach lessons or anything is so different from observing a video game, because there's real suffering and real pain and real loss.
Can I respond to that?
Mhm.
The current idea is that our eyes, people who are doing ayahuasca, people who are doing DMT, they're having these experiences where they're feeling like we're not actually perceiving the true world that we live in. Our eyes and our fingertips are just adapted so that we can survive in this place, right? So when I see something, I'm not actually seeing something. I'm seeing the light waves that are coming off of that object, and so my brain is interpreting these harmonic waves and giving me colors. If you're a player in a video game, let's say you're playing, Tekken or one of these fighting games, and you're getting beat up and your bar goes down in health, and you start to lose strength, as a character limited to the game sphere, that character could be feeling pain. You and I in this holographic place are feeling pain, but it would be just like having our bar of strength be lowered, but we happen to be feeling it as physical pain. how do we know that
But
on
no, it
another
isn't.
ethereal
It
plane?
is not the same. Like in a video game, there is no sentient being that is actually suffering. So if you want to make the argument that maybe we're not even experiencing reality, we still are suffering. So whether that's because we are, whichever analogy or hypothetical you wanted to do, that even if this is all fake, we are still actually suffering. And I think there's a real
Yeah,
danger in viewing this all as just a hallucination or a hologram, because then what's your motivation to actually reduce suffering? What's your motivation to actually reduce the harm if none of this is real?
that's the question. Is this a place where I get to reduce harm so that I have the ability to get into a place where harm is no longer allowed? And the reason I'm saying that is, imagine if you're trying to create a musical instrument. You have to first create harmony or vibration, right, to create a musical instrument. So a piano has all of these keys. Now, you first had to pluck a string and say, wow, I can make an instrument based on plucked strings. There's an infinite number of disharmonic string frequencies you're not going to include into your piano that you're later going to make concertos with, right? There are Indian sitars that use much different tuning than we do on our American Western pianos and guitars. They have chosen a lot more notes to include in their instrument than we do here. The idea is that if somebody challenges God and says, God, I think you're really a dick, right? The Luciferian doctrine says, do what you want to do what thou wilt, right? God's really the jerk. God says he just wants to control you. He wants to tell you what to do. Don't listen to him. Don't do what he wants. You do what you want to do. And that's how you're going to have real freedom, right? And even in Genesis, God says, okay, man knows good and evil now, right? We don't want them to live eternally with this, ability to go back and forth between good and evil. So what could God do possibly if he was challenged face to face by an accuser? He could only do one thing. He could say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to create an alternate reality, a second reality. I'm going to give it to you. I'll put myself in it. And then everyone in the heavenly host can watch what's happening to me in your world. The idea that a homeless man who fed the poor and healed the sick was killed after Lucifer said, I'll give you everything on the earth if you just kneel down
Wait,
and
hang
bow
on. I
to
need to
me.
stop you there,
Right?
because so you're saying that God's only option is to create essentially a game-like scenario to demonstrate that his way is correct. And in this scenario, this goes on for thousands of years with billions of people experiencing suffering. Like, again, this isn't a game. Real people are actually suffering.
If a person is going to paradise after this, is the suffering even that important? If
Yeah.
there is something
Yes.
after, if there is.
Yes.
What?
Yes, it
Was
is that important. And again,
yeah.
that's the danger of this worldview. If you're trying to say that, well, this life doesn't actually really matter that much, because in light of eternity, who cares about the suffering that we're encountering here? Yeah, that makes this life kind of worthless. And I don't think that that's the case. And it makes it easy to dismiss people's suffering, to dismiss, oh, this many million children starved to death. That's okay. They'll just go to heaven. I think that causes so much more suffering in the world to have that perspective.
It's
Yeah, I
also
would
an
agree with you.
extremely privileged position to have. Like it's so. I can be honest with you, man. It's pretty disgusting. I think it ignores so much real suffering to have this like little, I don't, like I don't know, like game playing fantasy thing when people are actually suffering and starving. 9 million people every year die from starvation.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
that God would be pure
So then,
evil, whatever you want to call it. That's fucking evil.
right, but then who are the people who've created the most hospitals and given out the most aid and helped the most number of people? Are people who believe that God came down as a man,
Well,
suffered, and
No.
entered into suffering with us, right?
that's
Aren't
not true,
most
but it's
hospitals church
also
based? Or
it's just also, first of all, it's not true, but it's also irrelevant, because Christians make up the majority of the population, which means by default, whenever anybody does anything, the fact that they're Christian isn't the thing that's playing into that. But like even in non-Christian or non-predominantly Christian countries, they're doing the same things we're doing. This is something that we do in the first world because it's what first world countries do. It's not because they're Christian.
That is debatable because the history of a lot of this has been Christian. The history, like
The history of
Principia Mathematica was written by a Christian. Like he was a
History of
religious
what?
man, and so Principia Mathematica, a lot of the
I don't know what that is.
astronomers and people who are
what does that have to do with
the-
helping
a lot of
people?
I
Yeah.
think we've gone off that path.
No, so the idea is that the history of helping other people
Well,
comes from a compassion that comes from some source. Either it's secular, it's coming from inside of you, or maybe a person who's not born with a compassionate gene has an experience or reads a story of a transcendent human who helped other people, was killed for it unfairly, and then was given this story of,
well,
hey,
he
the
wasn't
creator of this
killed because he was
holographic
helping
universe-
people. He was
Well, he
killed
claimed to
because
be
he
God, that's
committed
why they killed him.
blasphemy and sedition. But
Yeah, he
like,
claimed to be God, right?
yeah, that's why he got killed. So, but he didn't get killed because he's helping people. So, like, let me ask you a question. This is why we're already back to where we started, which is, I don't understand. Like, if the world was finely tuned and perfect for life, nobody would have to help anybody. Like this idea that we need to learn how to help each other is only valuable in a planet that is difficult to survive on and not finely tuned for life.
Yeah, I think you missed my point. The moment of the Big Bang was finely tuned for life to exist. Okay. The
What?
reality that you and I have has been given just enough disparity to give us opportunities to help, to be a light in a dark
But again,
place.
we don't need
To learn
we
how to
don't
be
need
better.
to learn how to help. That the helping is only necessary to overcome the hardship and the suffering. But if you don't have hardship and suffering here, then the virtue of helping others is no longer relevant.
Okay, so what if a human being creates the hardship? You have an evil person does something evil. Is that
Well, it
God's
doesn't
fault?
matter. The hardship we're talking about is the stuff that's in creation. Like we're talking about fine tuning. We're not talking about mankind, right? Mankind has, in your worldview, they have the ability to make decisions. So, like, yeah, we understand that mankind is going to do some shit, right? But God is still in control of what God does. Like, God could make the planet so that it doesn't have natural disasters that kill over 100,000 people a year on average. He could make biology such that children don't get bone cancer or that the sun doesn't give you skin cancer. Like, these are things that God gets to control, right? But God, if God is using these things, I fail to see what he's using them for. So, like, why would God make it so that we need the sun, but also it will give us cancer?
So you are aware of the vision of heaven, right? That heaven will be illuminated by the presence of God himself, right? You won't need a sun. You won't need an illuminated being, right?
Will that be cancer
you know about
causing
that.
as well?
No, it's going to be heaven, right? No tears, that whole promise that we're getting of this
Sure.
heavenly place after
And
death,
why not
right?
do that now?
Why would you ever have any? Okay, so if you maybe I can back up. Do you think it would be better to be able to download information like Neo in the Matrix, and now I know Kung Fu, or the ability to then go through the motions and learn it? Which one would be a better knowledge base, to actually have gone through the experience or just have it downloaded into me?
Well, it depends on which one. If we're just talking about learning how to do something, like I want to learn how to do cook a new recipe, yeah, just download that shit. I don't care. Yeah, if I want to learn how to do something difficult, there are some things that you're better at learning by doing it yourself, but that's irrelevant, right? Because learning something through practice is not the same as learning through getting like your ass kicked. Like, so for example, if I have to learn how to put up a fence while somebody's shooting arrows at me, that's not a necessary learning obstacle, right? But also, none of it's relevant because none of this is going to be happening in heaven. And yet, there are people that are going to be born into heaven and they have no experience here on earth. There are trillions, maybe billions, who knows? There are billions of babies that never made it past infancy that are going to be in heaven that have no experience down here, which means being born into this environment where you have no experience, yet you're still in perfect existence, is completely compatible. You don't have to be down here suffering to understand how to live in heaven.
Yeah, that makes sense. So why are we here, and why does it hurt to be here? The question is, if I am going to be able to teach someone else in heaven what it's like to be good, let's say I do make it to heaven and I get to raise these babies, as you're saying. This is a claim from the Bible, or just a logical claim that babies get to heaven, right? All dogs go to heaven.
Wait, you have
babies
to
go to heaven.
teach people how to be good in heaven? Why do you
No,
have
I'm
to
saying
teach
if I'm going to
anyone
raise those
anything in
children,
heaven?
no, I'm saying if I'm going to raise those children, I'm going to be part of that community,
Why?
right?
No, it's
You
heaven.
may be
Everything's
playing.
perfect.
Well, I believe that, but we're
I
debating
just, so
that
yeah,
because you
in
guys
your
are different.
worldview, like in your worldview, everything is perfect when you're in heaven. No one needs to teach anyone anything.
Okay. So because I've experienced suffering here, then I will get to heaven and understand what it actually is worth. Because I've helped other people through
What?
their
How?
suffering, and they have helped me through mine,
But
then
why
I
is that
understand
important?
really through practice. Why is it important?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, to
What?
keep evil out of a perfect place.
In heaven?
How do I keep evil out of a
What?
perfect place?
Oh,
How
wait,
would I
Gated
you have to
community in
keep
heaven?
evil?
But you have to
How would you
eliminate
keep
people from
evil out of
heaven?
heaven? No,
I
no,
guess
no,
I'm
no, no.
confused at what you're
The
saying.
idea. Okay, sorry. Let me back up then. The idea is that anyone who chooses to continue or to have a relationship with the creator of this world, then says, "Hey, I'm on his team." Then I'm able to go to heaven, right? That's the Christian idea. If I have a relationship with Christ, then because of his righteousness, I go to heaven, right? That's what we believe.
Unless you're a baby.
Right? But if somebody says, I don't like the God who created this world, I don't want to be with that God.
Oh, no,
Let's
no,
call
that's
him
not how that
Yahweh,
works. Nope.
right?
Nope.
Well,
Nobody
the
believes in
understanding
this
is if I
God.
reject Christ.
Nobody believes in this God and just says, I don't want to go to heaven. The people that are going to hell are the people who don't believe. Like, we don't believe this God is real. Whether or not we like him is irrelevant.
Okay, so how is hell defined in the Bible?
Well, hell is defined as wailing and
Bunch
gnashing
of
of teeth,
different
but
ways.
that's also a divergent topic. We're still talking about heaven, right? So I'm still trying to figure out why we need to teach anybody, as Sarah said, anything in heaven. If God's going to make it perfect, there's going to be no more tears, no more sorrow, no more suffering. Why do we need to learn anything down here to be up there when the vast majority of individuals up there will have no experience down here? The vast majority of people that will ever be in heaven, based on statistics, will be babies that didn't survive infanthood.
Okay, that's debatable, but okay, yeah.
No, I mean, do you think
So
babies
if
are going
I-
to hell?
No, I
All
don't.
right, so they got to be in
They
heaven,
had
right?
no- Okay, perfect. So maybe that's why all the paintings are full of these little baby cherubs, right?
Well, I mean, that's another story.
Right?
But like, you understand
It is
the
funny.
infant mortality rate in history at certain points was upwards of 40%.
Yeah.
Which means
So
like
if I'm-
40% of the people that were going to be born they're dead. They're in heaven. Now, if you believe miscarriages go to heaven, it's even higher.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
so
insanely high.
heaven sounds like a pretty great place to be, and maybe I would wish that I didn't have to go through this and I got miscarried or whatever, and I ended up in heaven straight up. That sounds pretty awesome to me.
Why
Okay.
does heaven sound like
I'm
a great
here.
place to be?
Well, because they were promised that there's no more weeping, that we're going to get a new body, right?
Sure.
All of these things that we're afraid of or hurting here, they're going to be taken away. That's the promise that we're given through these old scriptures. So it sounds
Still
pretty
sounds
great.
like torture.
No.
But that
No.
promise is only like what you're describing is creating the problem and then promising to solve the problem. But the problem is entirely unnecessary. God could have created all of the creatures that he wanted directly in heaven, and none of this is necessary. Like, God knows everything. So when he creates you, he knows what you're going to choose. And again, God is fine with bringing people into heaven without their choosing. Because if babies go directly to heaven, those babies never had the opportunity to choose. So God's clearly okay with bringing billions of people into heaven without them ever leading a human life. And so there's really no need for all of this painful life. And you even run into a problem if you're going to make the argument that, well, no, we have to go through this for some sort of character development in some way. But when you are going to heaven, you get a new body, right? And a new, depending on your flavor of Christianity, I mean, for you to never be sad again, you would have to forget your loved ones who didn't make it to heaven. Are you going to remember all of your experiences on earth anyway? I mean, there's just no good reason for us to have to go through this.
I agree. It doesn't, that kind of stuff is mind bending. But in the Christian ideology, or in that, as you guys want to call it, in the Christian myth, that God did create a perfect place in heaven, and the entities and the rulers and leaders in heavenly places got to be in that place, and some of them fell and chose wickedness, right? They
Which
chose
ones?
evil, right? There's a verse that says Jesus or God takes his place in the assembly of the gods, and
Psalm
he tells
82.
them, I tell you that you're gods, but you're going to die like men because you chose evil.
Yeah,
right?
Psalm 82. But
So
I'm
if
asking which ones fell, because like I think those are two different groups. Like the fallen angels, I think if you're referring to in Genesis 6, they're all locked up. They're locked
Are
up
they?
in
Or are they
chains
yet?
according to
They're going
Second
to
Peter
be.
and Jude.
They're going to be, right?
No, they are. They're locked up in chains waiting judgment. Right?
Okay,
So
cool.
why wouldn't God just lock up Satan?
How do you know he's not?
No,
He
he
roams
should
to
have
and fro looking for.
he should have already, is what I'm saying. Like he should have done it like the first time Satan fucked up. He should have said, "Oh, this guy's dangerous. He's gonna fuck everything up if I let him live," and he should have put him in chains.
So if he had put him in chains, would that have shown God's perfect love?
I think it would have shown some love. I think if it was perfect love, he would have just done what Sarah's suggesting, which is create everybody in heaven and don't have any pain and suffering.
So don't have any free will, just only good.
Oh, you don't need free
Wait,
will.
do we have free will in heaven?
If we're choosing, yeah. That's the
No,
difference.
once
If
you
I
get
choose
to
be in
heaven,
but if I
once
choose
you're
to be
there,
with
do you
Christ, I
have
get
free
to
will?
heaven. So the idea is that I'm not doing it because I want to go to heaven. I'm doing it because I now understand what's been done.
You
but once you
misunderstand my
get there,
question.
once
My
you get there,
question
will
is,
you have
once
free
you're
will?
there,
Uh-huh.
is there free will in heaven once you are there?
Yes, just like technically there's free will in heaven now. That's why Lucifer was able to fall. Right?
Okay, so if we have free will in heaven, but it's going to be a place where there's no suffering and no sin, why is earth necessary if we can still have free will in heaven?
Because if people who have an evil will get into heaven, it's going to infect heaven, yes or no?
In fact, wait, I'm sorry. Have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God? Or are there some good people
Yes.
and some bad people?
All have fallen short of the horsepower that spoke the universe into existence, yes.
Okay,
So
so
therefore, the question.
we are.
So here's the
Do
question.
you think everyone is bad, or like this idea that they're evil people that could infect heaven doesn't jive with the rest of Christian theology?
Yeah, I thought everybody was evil and our righteousness was like filthy rags.
There's none good but God.
It's correct. So I have.
Okay, so then none of us
selfish
go to
beings.
heaven. What? Sir, do you see how you're going
Thank
in
you.
circles here?
Also,
but thank
like,
you, because you
heaven
just
isn't being
what-
safeguarded against people with ill will because evil people go to heaven as long as they believe in Jesus. And like decent people who don't want to hurt anybody will go to hell. Like Sarah and I and Mac, we're all going to go to hell. We're not evil. We don't want to hurt anybody. We just don't believe in this cloud zombie. That's all. Like
well, that's
how is
so
keeping
you
us out hurting anyone or helping
no,
anyone?
but you summed up this relationship with God thing perfectly. That yes, we none of us deserve to go to heaven and be with God. We don't. None of us do. Those of
Well,
us who choose to be
So
with
then none
God
of us
because
should
of what
go
He did
because
for
you
us.
just said that we can't have any evil that might infect heaven, but 100% of us have evil will. So none of us can go.
Mhm. Amen, sister. Right? So
No,
then,
no, you just
what
said
is
that you are going. That's a contradiction to your existing belief.
no? The reality is, I don't deserve to go, and I
But
may not
okay,
go, right? Because
you're
think
still
about it.
missing the
It says
point. You're
even Jesus said,
misunderstanding my
just
point.
yeah, just pause for a second. I want to make sure, Todd, you understand what she's saying. Your claim
I do.
was that some people need to be excluded from heaven because they'll like contaminate it with their ill will. And Sarah has pointed out that all humans, according to the Bible, have ill will.
Mhm.
So like
Correct.
that kind of gatekeeping, like we only let people in that don't have ill will, would result in nobody ever going to heaven because all human beings have ill will. So the idea that God has
So
to gatekeep the bad ones
yes.
out, that's not really true according to Christian doctrine. But I got to turn it over to Sarah and Mike. I got to use the restroom. Y'all in charge.
So this is the contradiction with like choosing to go to heaven or free will in heaven or who goes to heaven. So again, why can't we all just be born in heaven?
I think that's what I'm trying to get to. But the idea it's not that people with ill will don't get in. The problem is that nobody likes the idea that Jesus said He is the gate and no one comes in except through Him, and that's why people are so upset because people
No,
who
no,
cast
no
out
one's
demons
upset
heal the
about
sick.
that. I mean, you've said earlier that infants all go, right? So if an infant dies,
No,
that
Justin said
infant never has to make the choice. They never have to choose. They just get let in automatically, right?
Justin said they all go in, and I
Do
personally
you
don't think
say
that it's a
that?
bad thing if you get. I
I'm
don't
not
think
saying
it's a
it's a
bad
bad
thing
thing.
if
I'm just
somebody gets to
clarifying your
heaven.
beliefs.
If
So
someone
do
gets
you
to
think
heaven and
all
doesn't have
babies,
to go,
I'm sorry, say that
the
again?
delay. I said, if somebody gets to heaven and does not have to go through this life, I think it sounds amazing. It sounds awesome.
Great. So a truly loving God would just do that.
So a truly loving God did that in heaven already, and somehow there was a problem. And now it's
So
coming
wait,
through in us. Because if I can give
when
it
you say
a
somehow there was
personal
a
experience,
problem, do you mean something that is within God's control or something that surprised God that he did not know was coming?
no, He knew that it was coming. Like I said,
So it was
so
part
the
of his
idea is
plan,
if I know that He knew it was going to come, but He
but he
chose it
could have
anyway.
prevented it if he didn't want it to happen.
He is.
No, he didn't
It's
prevent
like
it because we're here. We're not in heaven.
so back to the piano idea. If I'm going to make a piano, I know I'm going to have notes that are not in harmony with the piano. I'm only going to choose the notes that make my piano perfectly in tune. But during that process of making and tuning the piano, I'm going to have to reject a lot of out of tune vibrations, right?
that you made.
No. No,
Yeah,
Like
again,
I don't understand how this is not just again an evil God. Like he knows, right? He knows before anybody is created, before the universe was created, he knows exactly who is going to heaven and who is not, but he still makes them anyway.
Okay,
How is
so
that
how
not
about
evil?
maybe this is no help. Maybe this will help. If you guys ever watch the Super Bowl a second time around,
Nah.
you watch the replay,
Nope.
never, right? But if you were to watch it a second time, would you be able to predict? You would be able to predict what was coming next. You would know the outcome
I
of
have
the
no
game.
control over the Super Bowl.
I know, but during the
So it's
live
different. It's
performance,
not a
those
good
players had
analogy.
free will. But during the live
No,
performance, the players had free will. During the replay, they did not, correct?
no, it's not a good analogy because
Mm.
I don't have any control over anyone's actions. So it's different.
Okay.
It's not a good analogy.
So it's the
But
idea
there's
of
also
if
there's
God
no
is
such
outside
thing
of
as
time
like
and
the
space.
live game if he's omniscient. It's he
Mhm.
already knows. He already knows every play. He knows every blade of grass,
Yeah. So,
like how it's going to move on at every second of the game. Like it's not analogous.
yeah. So if I'm given the task to ad lib a movie, and the guy is filming the movie and knows how the movie ends after he wraps it, a good outside of reality God would know how the movie's going to end before it happens, right? But I'm still ad libbing as I go because I get to play the part. This is
Then that's
my
not
ability to help
omniscience.
the
Then
start.
Yeah.
God doesn't know everything.
And
So
from the
one
God's
level,
view, he knows every ad lib you're going to do, or he's not all knowing.
so if you're looking at dimensional, my understanding of dimensions is that one dimension is us here in time doing something. The fifth dimension is being able to go back and forward on this timeline. The sixth dimension is being able to go on multiple timelines from this starting point. The seventh dimension is going on all the timelines from any starting point, right? So if God knows all of those things, and I happen to choose this one timeline and do these actions, but God already knows all the possible actions that could be in the matrix that he
That
made.
You didn't
Then
choose the timeline.
that still doesn't solve any of the problem that you've addressed, is that God created a perfect place and then you said something went wrong. But God knew
So
that
in
that
heaven,
something was going to go wrong, and God knew that was going to happen, and he did not prevent it. But he could have.
correct.
And like you said, what would be best is for us all to just be born in heaven. And
I didn't
you've
say it
still
was best.
not given any good reason why God couldn't just start us all off in heaven.
So I didn't say that would be best. I said it sounds pretty good. Okay. I personally have gone through enough things where I have grown as a human because of hardships. I went through cancer. I've lost both my parents, like within 3 months of each other. Like
Oof.
we all go through hard stuff, but I've learned about myself and who I am because of those hardships. And so I don't want to take those away. I wouldn't want to not remember. So if God really, the idea is hell is described as separation from God, outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth, regret for what you coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? And
But we're
we all
talking about
have those
heaven, not
moments where we
hell.
look back and say, I know, but we all have those moments where we look back on our life and we cringe and we say, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? And I wish I could go back and change it. We have those moments. Everybody does, right? So if the gatekeeper to heaven is not whether you're good or bad or have ill intent, the gatekeeper is, did you have a relationship with this one resurrected guy, God incarnate in man, and had spiritual experiences? The idea is you have a conscience, right? And do you listen to your conscience 100% of the time? Or do you at least try, right? Because the conscience
Wait,
is an
what?
outside source of information.
This
Think
is
about it.
so
If you
You've set like
decide,
3 different gates here. So one,
no, if
again,
Jesus is let me make it
the gate doesn't make any sense because you're letting all the babies in. All those babies
Yep.
didn't have to have a relationship with Jesus. And then you said it's about if you have a relationship with Jesus, but that's also different from saying, do you follow your conscience all the time? That's also a completely different bar.
okay.
The thing is,
I
if God
apologize.
can
My
let
brain.
babies in, he can let anyone in.
yeah. My
Okay.
conscience moves away from this God,
Right. So here's
so
the
I'm
thing.
following my
Was there an
conscience by
age,
not subscribing to
right?
this.
Was there an age when you were younger? When you were younger, there was an age when you didn't know the difference between right and wrong. You had never done anything wrong. You were pretty much innocent. But I can place a bet that most people have at least some point in their childhood where they had something come up to them and give them an opportunity to either choose good or choose bad. And they knew it was bad when they did it, but they did it anyway just to see what the fruit of evil would taste like.
No,
right?
it's called being human.
Ew, I don't think anyone wants to taste the fruit of
It's
evil.
so
Yeah.
weird.
I've
That's an
never
analogy.
Like
in my
you're
entire life
talking about a kid.
wanted to do evil.
So, okay, let me give you a
Same. I
confession. Then.
never
When I was a
wanted to
little
do
kid,
evil.
when I was a little kid, there was a supermarket, a little corner store, and they used to put the Hot Wheel cars, the Matchbox cars, right by the front door. And I saw them and I wanted one, and I knew I wasn't supposed to take it, right? And I knew in my heart I wasn't supposed to take it, but I took it anyway. And I went home, and my mom, bless her heart, she said, "Hey, where'd you get that car?" And I said, "Oh, right, all the things you do as a kid to get out of being in trouble." She made me take it back, and she said, "Do you know? Remember that feeling you had? That feeling you knew you were going to do something wrong, and you just felt yucky inside, right? That feeling is important because it doesn't necessarily come from us. We want what we
Yeah,
want.
but what's this got to do with heaven?
Yeah, yeah.
So the idea
You're
is,
making the
if
case
there
that
is,
people do wrong things. That's
Yeah. Also, you wanted the
okay,
car.
we all
You
do
didn't
that,
want to do evil. Like it's if you wanted to do evil,
right?
you wouldn't feel icky about it.
But I stole it, and I knew it was stealing.
Yeah, because you wanted the car.
But I was a thief.
You felt icky, but you said because you want to do evil. If you're doing something you want to do, you don't feel icky about it.
But I knew it was wrong before I did it.
right, because you're actually a good person and you don't want to do evil. That's
Then
why
why
you
did I
felt
do it?
bad.
That's why the guilt is
Why
there
did I
because you
do it?
wanted the car.
Because you wanted the car. You're a child.
But I was a child above the age of knowing right from wrong.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're a human being. People make
So
mistakes.
is that
That's
my
part of being human. That
so
doesn't
is
make
that
you
my excuse?
evil.
Is that my excuse in a secular world?
What excuse? It's a reason. Not every reason is an excuse.
Okay, now fast forward, I'm 25, and let's say I want to steal a real
You don't
car,
need to give
and I
us
know it's
more
wrong, but I
evil
want it.
things that you've done. I think
I
you're
didn't do
losing the
that. I'm
plot
saying
here.
Yeah, you kind of
The
lost
if
the
I
point
did
forest
it,
in
is
the
about
trees
heaven.
here. We're trying to figure
right?
out
But if I
why
did it,
God doesn't just grant everybody heaven from the start. Why?
okay. So my understanding is that the word Christian is only in the Bible about 3 times, and the word disciple is like 293 or something, like
Oh boy.
262 times, right? Right? So it's not
Is
that I'm a
your
Christian; it's that
answer
I
going to be
actually
something that
follow.
can only be accomplished on earth, or is it going to be something that could also be accomplished in heaven?
Okay, so I've got 2 questions to answer then. So is something could God make world perfect? Yes, he could. And could I learn things in heaven without having to go through suffering? Yes, of course. If you're asking me why suffering exists, my only answer is that I am here to help other people if I can, because I have been
But
helped and try to
we
make
already
the world a
addressed
better
this.
place.
The help
Yeah,
is
that's
only
not a good
relevant in a
answer.
world with suffering.
So what you're saying that you're making the best of a bad situation, which I appreciate. And I think as humans, that is what we are all doing. We are making the best of a bad situation, but you're neglecting the deeper question of why are we in a bad situation in the first place? When we could have been born in heaven, and as you said, we could learn things in heaven. There's absolutely no need for this, even though you are making the best of it, which is commendable.
Also, not to move the needle too far, but if knowing how to behave a way is good, God could just give us that moral instinct from the beginning, and whatever life experience that he thinks we need, he could just create us with that experience. Like, there's still God's all powerful. There's no need ever to force people to suffer.
Or force him to be friends with God, right?
No, we said suffer.
The first
But what
people that
about being
tried that
friends
got
with God?
fucked up pretty bad.
Can you force
The
someone
whole
to be
knowing
God's
good and
friend?
evil thing.
We're not asking about being God's friend. We're talking about suffering.
Right, I understand, but you're talking about the elimination of free will, because one of the things
No, we're
that
No,
not.
you just said there is free will in heaven.
So in
well, no,
in
you
heaven,
assume that
in Revelation 21, right? People are going to be in heaven and they're not going to sin, right?
that's my understanding, yeah.
What? How?
So why couldn't we have it, right? because they
So
will choose
what's
not to sin.
what's
Because of the
preventing them
relationship.
from
It's
choosing to
illustrated
sin?
their relationship with Jesus that saved them because of his
So
example.
so then Christians here who have a relationship with Jesus won't sin.
In here on earth, that's the ideal, yeah.
But they do.
Is that what
Right?
happens?
No. of
Is
course
that what
not.
happens? So what's
Christians
different
here
about heaven?
sin.
So what's different about heaven?
Because the story is that once you go through this
His mic dropped out.
Sorry. You go through then the idea is that you're going to know God more clearly, and you're
Oh.
going to realize the grace that life, right?
Okay, so it's being in the physical presence of God. So then he could just do that now, and then we'd all know, and we wouldn't sin.
Have you had an experience where you felt like you were really in the presence of God before?
Well, that actually doesn't address the point. My point is, if it's being in the physical presence of God that causes people to desire to be not sinning, then he could just
Right.
do that. Like if his presence is that powerful, then he could just do that now. He doesn't have to wait.
So that's where my statement on the conscience came in, but there was a lot of other stuff going on. Do you understand the idea of my conscience is the I should voice in my head, and I should is a set of rules being imposed on me, right? And it's not what I want to do. So the I will voice and the I should voice, they battle amongst themselves as equals usually, unless you take that as that's the Holy Spirit of God given to all mankind. Remember,
You're not
the
actually
new
addressing
covenant,
the question.
right? But in the presence of God, you won't sin because it's written on your heart.
Oh, good.
All
Then
men,
just do that. Just put all people there. Put all people in heaven right from the go.
I mean, isn't that the new covenant?
yeah, that we won't even have to tell people to know God because we already will because it's written
Yeah.
on our hearts, right?
Jeremiah 31. Just do that.
Right. So that's what if we're trying to do it because we hear God's voice and we obey, then we
Oh
have a
my God.
relationship and we make the world a better place, right? One of the statements you
No.
made was that we're
No,
all
we
trying to make
we
the
don't
world
need to make the world a
place, but
better
I don't
place if
believe
it's
that.
perfect. That misses the point. Everything you keep saying only assumes that the world is not perfect. But if God just created the world perfect and created us in his presence so that we wouldn't have the desire to sin, then none of this is relevant anymore.
But you wouldn't have free will, not true
You-
free will.
You just said we would.
You just said we would.
No, but
I'm
if we
getting
did it, the
this is
first
getting
way,
like
if we do
I'm
it
getting
where-
whiplash here.
I'm seeing a carousel.
So
No, you know
why
what,
would
then?
we
I'll go
not
back to
have
the beginning.
why would we
I
not have free
appreciate your
will?
patience. I appreciate your patience with idiots like me. Then
You're
Thank
not
you.
an idiot,
You
Todd. I
guys are
think
rock stars.
so. Here's what happens, Todd. So I've been in your shoes. Okay, what happens is you're realizing that like there's not a good argument for God creating this world versus the preferred world, right? And so what you're doing, you're listening to what we're saying, and rather you can't bring yourself to agree with us because you know agreeing with us would mean that the story doesn't make sense anymore, right? So what you're doing is you're searching for any excuse that you can that could justify God creating this world rather than the preferred world, and they're just not really good excuses, right? And like I know right now like you're kind of in the hot seat, so you're going to feel some pressure to like defend your worldview, and I totally get that. We all go through that. But I hope later tonight you think about this. Like, is there really a good reason, like really, really a good reason for this whole mess to be here and us to be in it, rather than just creating the preferred world, the world that God would prefer? Like, this is his preference, not ours. If his preference was heaven, it should be everybody's preference, and God should have just done that thing.
That sounds great. And then when I got saved in 2007, it's because I was challenged and the room went red and I felt like Lucifer was challenging me. If you're really good, if you are really all good, then prove it. Right? I want to know your real nature, Yahweh. So the real in what I was shown at that time, God said, fine. If you don't like being in my world, the angels, Lucifer, right? Lucifer doesn't like God. Then I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a whole world. It's going to be perfect, just like heaven. and I'm going to give it to Lucifer, and then I'm going to put myself in it. And you can all watch the difference between Lucifer and my world and me in Lucifer's world. So your contention that
Wait, why
this
do they need
world
that?
is God's, right? This
Wait,
world
no,
is Lucifer's
no. Why,
accusers
why do we need
and
Lucifer's
evil
world?
beings. This is Lucifer's.
No, no.
You have the
Why?
ability to question
Why
God
does Lucifer get his own world?
because he questioned God. You get your
So
own world. You're
because
questioning
Lucifer
God, you get your
questioned
own world.
God, he's allowed to get his own kingdom and make everyone suffer?
I've
You
actually heard
probably
this
know
one
this
before.
better than anyone, but you probably know this better than anyone. There is the idea that this world, the prince of this world, is not God or Jesus, right?
No, it's Satan. Yeah, 2 Corinthians 4:4 says so. The God of this world blinds people to the light of the gospel. I know that. My question is, why would God create Satan and to have his own world where he harms people, where he's searching for people to devour? Why would he do that?
So all of my understanding of the Greek gods and Roman gods and a lot of the gods, the pantheon of worldly gods, are that they're vindictive, they shoot lightning bolts, they punish their enemies, they're
Yes.
capricious,
Yeah,
right?
they make more sense. I
Sounds
know.
that sounds
Right.
like the Hebrew God.
Well,
True.
so
That is true.
so the Hebrew God, my understanding is that in order, once they divided all the people according to the sons of the Elohim, whatever, the Benai Elohim, they divided up the world among all the heavenly hosts, and God said, I'm going to make my own people. And they were in a barbaric world without a money system. So yeah, slavery was there. And so he told them, these are the rules. You're going to tone it down, right?
Oh
You guys
no.
argue that all the time. But
No,
No,
there's
but
no.
but
Their,
that
their
doesn't.
their slavery was harsher than the neighboring, right? In
Yeah.
the was it the 42 laws of Ma'at?
So
You could have a slave for 3 years, but the Hebrews they doubled it. Like it's more
yeah,
severe.
Hammurabi Law 117 says that your slave will only
Hammurabi,
serve for
thank you.
3 years. But this doesn't answer the question. My question is, God
I'll
knows
finish
Satan's
it.
evil. Why does Satan get his own world to harm God's creation?
I never get a
For
good
the
answer for that one.
opportunity, yeah, for the opportunity of God to enter that creation and take the suffering himself, beating, getting whipped, death on the cross,
So
so
God
that he
wanted
would
to suffer?
No, to prove his nature, to prove that he was going to fulfill his word.
He couldn't do it
His
any.
promise.
The only way God could prove his nature is to make himself suffer.
And to make a world
No,
where
to
billions
not
of people
Because
suffer.
that part, it's so
no,
crazy. Like
to
literally
understand.
billions of people suffer, just so he can come down and prove that he can suffer. Like that is think about that. Like put a little bit of thought into that. It's
Yeah, I know.
insane. It's insanely cruel.
Like you just made
But
a
the
movie.
But the suffering is coming not from God, but from doing what you want to do, right?
No.
Everybody on the planet is doing
No.
No.
so
I didn't create
factories,
natural
so
disasters. I didn't create bone cancer.
I told you 9 million people starve. How many do you think are like do that? That's a result of like they're screwing up somehow.
no greed from rich people.
No, wrong. People have been starving
Factories and chemicals
forever.
in the water.
People starve because they live in lands where it's nearly impossible to get the resources you need to survive. Like there are places where people walk miles just to get fresh water. In fact, when I was in Nicaragua, I lived in an area where people walked miles to use a single well because they're like not every place you go just has fresh well water. Like there are people living in places where it's nearly impossible to get fresh water and grow crops.
Yeah, I know.
Hey,
And
I got
I'm
to
gonna argue-
make my dismount here. Sorry,
Yeah.
1 second.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm
thanks
gonna
for
call
hanging
it
out,
tonight.
Mac. Good to see
Yeah,
you, buddy.
thanks. It was great seeing you guys. Sarah, it was great seeing you.
Good to
Justin,
see you.
good talking to you guys. Thank you all so much for the gifts, especially Xena. So have a good night, y'all.
Thanks, buddy. Guys, make sure you're
Thanks.
following Mac Luster.
I was
So-
actually about to say I'm gonna head out pretty soon too.
I know it's getting late. I kept everyone late
It's-
tonight.
Yeah,
It's all right.
I want to add just this. The idea is that the pain and suffering, if you trace it back far enough.
Can't hear his mic.
We lost your audio again.
Lack of
You're a little bit quiet.
sorry. Does that help?
I think it's better now, yeah.
Okay. My argument is that maybe some of the suffering that we go through is a lack of compassion from other humans, and not necessarily
No,
a
natural
natural thing.
disasters.
We could
Todd,
say,
people die in tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, hurricanes. This is not a lack of compassion. These are like God created a planet that intentionally murders its inhabitants.
yeah, that sucks. So I don't have a, other than saying it from my experience, from saying how I got saved and the relationship that I was shown, that in order to prove this nature of God's, that he's not going to hit you back when you strike at him. He's going to give you time. He's going to say, I'll even lay down my life for you to come to paradise with me.
But Todd, he's
because this is
immaterial.
paradise law. Yeah, God's outside of even the
Yeah,
creation.
you can't strike God.
right?
You can't hit him.
Correct. But you can strike Jesus, who was his avatar in creation, right?
I can't.
No,
Well, no, but the Holy
because when you're
Spirit
in
that drove
because
him
when you're
can
in His
drive you
presence, you
to
won't
it.
have that desire. Remember, when you're in His presence, you won't have the desire to do evil or to do sins, which means you're not going to have the
You're right.
desire to strike him.
You're right. So whatever the digital connection between God outside the matrix and Jesus inside the matrix, that Holy Spirit between the two of them, I have the ability to have that in my life. And when I choose it, I don't want to do evil. When I reject it, that's when I do. My nature
Okay,
takes
so
over.
then what would be the problem of God just creating the heaven, putting people in the heaven? No one's going to sin because they're in God's presence. They're not going to want to sin. God's all powerful. He could teach us anything he needs to teach us without the suffering. Why would that be bad?
I don't think it would be bad. I'm going to agree with you on that one.
No,
That's the
then-
idea of the pre-fall heaven and earth. So
Right,
yeah,
but
there's my
there-
fall again.
Right, yeah. So there you go. So then that means there's no good reason for us to be here as opposed to there. Like, this is just an unanswered thing. This is something that, if Christianity was true, this is an unexpected state of affairs.
If Christianity were true,
I mean, if the God was real, not if Christianity is true. If this God was real and he was good, then this is an unexpected state of affairs. Now, if the God wasn't good, or he wasn't all-knowing, or he wasn't all-powerful, now we're talking. In order to make this world make sense, you have to diminish God's attributes. He can't be all-knowing, all-powerful, or,
All good.
maybe omnipresent either.
I think that's where people get hung up. The idea that God is only good. He's only the yin side to the yin and yang. But I
Okay,
think
so
that the
he's not
Bible
all good.
through it- the Bible says all through it that God contains good and evil. He knows
Sure.
good and evil. Right?
Okay, so God's
he's
part
the
evil.
one-
We agree then.
Yeah,
I don't
he
know if I want to
contains
worship a
everything.
God that's partly evil. That's not a God I'd like to worship.
So I'll tell you why I worship him and then I'll let you go. I worship him because if there is a balance of good and evil, but his nature was to lay down his life for me, that gives me the inspiration to lay down my life for other people.
Oh, he didn't have to lay down his life.
Make the world a better place.
No, he
But
he
he
doesn't
did.
do any of that. I didn't ask him to do that.
But that's the Christianity. That's it. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Is if
but
I know that he did,
but it's unnecessary.
then I'm inspired.
Jesus
but
killing
I fell in
himself
love
to
with him
fulfill his
because-
own bloodlust is not necessary. No one here asked him to die for us.
Yeah, you're right. But okay, maybe analogy. Let's say you're in prison and someone else takes a rap for you, or you're not in prison, someone else takes a rap for you. They take the fall in the underworld, let's say. You don't punk that person.
He
You know, that guy
doesn't
took a
have
rap,
to.
and I'm never gonna.
No, the judge
Right,
could just
but-
forgive it. You don't have to punish an innocent man to forgive somebody else. You could just forgive him. Like, that's the crazy thing with this
Nope.
whole substitutionary atonement. Like, if God just wanted to forgive your sins, He could just do that shit. He ain't got to punish anyone.
Okay, you're right.
Right? Like,
So
if a
if I
judge
just say, okay,
legitimately
God,
just wanted to let you out of prison, he could just let you out of
right.
prison. He doesn't have to, like, put an innocent man in your place.
But how does that change a person's heart and what they're going to do afterwards?
I think it would change it. Like, if I was in prison and the judge said, listen, you get out early, not because you did anything to earn it, just because I'm a nice guy, that changed my heart. I do not need an innocent person to suffer on my behalf. That makes it worse. Now I think this judge is evil, that he thinks he's going to let me out, someone who committed a crime, and punish this innocent dude for crimes. That doesn't, that lowers the bar. That makes this God even more dubious.
So you're aware that the judge in that scenario is the guy who's taking the punishment for you, right?
Well, now you get into the problem of the Trinity, which is logically absurd, because you can't say that Jesus is the Father and then say that Jesus is distinct from the Father. It's logically incoherent. Like, either there's two gods or there's one God and Jesus is not God. You can't have Jesus being God, God being God, and then there being any distinction between the two.
So I have two experiences that have given me a pretty good understanding. One was a glass of water,
Oh no.
right? So think about it,
No.
if God is all the water in the universe, and
Okay.
Jesus was a glass full of water, and the Holy Spirit is what happens when I drink the water. So that's one understanding.
That's
Right.
not an understanding, because that doesn't describe states of being. That just describes what you're doing with the water. And also,
Perfect.
the water
So it
analogy
clarified.
fails because it almost immediately goes to modalism, and modalism is a heresy. So in
I
the
understand
glass
that.
of water, there's only one glass of water, which means the problem you have with the God concept is that Jesus is distinct from the Father. So now you have two of something. Are they both two gods? Well, if they're both two gods, you just have polytheism. That's it.
No. Okay, so I live by the ocean. If I walk down to the
Okay,
ocean and
Justin, I
grab
gotta
a
go.
bucket of seawater,
All right, Sarah. Have a great night. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
if I grab a
Oh, boy.
bucket of seawater, does it cease to be the ocean?
It's part of the ocean, but partialism is also a heresy.
Okay, well, if I take a part of the ocean, it's the same usos and stuff and form of the ocean, and I can put it back in the ocean and it won't hurt anything.
But it's
I can
also a
still analyze it.
heresy because if Jesus is just a part of God, that means God has parts. And partialism is a heresy. Jesus is supposed to be 100% God.
He's also supposed to be a container, right? That he limited himself and he poured himself into this limited container. Okay,
Right,
so the other way I understand it,
which
yeah.
leads to
So
partialism.
that's fine. Call me a heretic. I don't really care.
Well, that's
My
fine. We're
thought
just
is,
letting you know that if you agree to partialism, then you must also agree that Jesus is not 100% God and God is not 100% Jesus. They are parts of a whole.
okay. And I know there's a lot of semantics and arguing about stuff like that in the church, and I will grant you that
Mhm.
for sure. So
Okay,
my
fair enough.
understanding is if I play a video game, like let's say go back to my video game, I play the game. I am the character that's playing the game because I'm outside the game, but I'm playing it. The character, my avatar in the game is me. It's me moving it around, getting the information. I'm the one in the game, and that avatar or character in the game is completely me. And the information running between my game controller, whether it's wireless or wired, all of that information between me and my character is also fully me. So it's three different expressions of the same me. So if God is outside of creation, Jesus was inside creation, and the Holy Spirit was the link between them. That's how I understand the Trinity, because I've been given an opportunity to also hear from that same Holy Spirit to be guided with free will, choose or not choose, do or not do, to go help this person. Hey, Todd, grab a jacket and drive to Long Beach in the rain. Why? Just do it. It turns into something awesome. I have an opportunity to help somebody. I don't know why I'm there, right? But it's a prompting. It's something you hear in your head because it's written on your heart. It's already there. right?
Okay,
So
so then
that's
what
how I
you've
understand.
got
If that's
is you've got
if
a
that's a
God
heresy, I'm sorry.
that is in 3 different parts, and one of those parts is temporal. So if Jesus is a part of God, that means
Mhm.
he's temporal, and God's not temporal.
Well, he's in the creation and he's out of the creation. If you're going to show me a verse that says that God cannot be temporal, then I don't have a response to that, because all through the Hebrew Bible it talks about Jacob wrestled with God. God was the fourth man in the
No,
fire.
temporal in existence. I mean, there were times when he didn't exist.
Okay. So that's assuming that Jesus only existed on the earth, but the idea that he ascended and is in heaven, he still exists, he's still alive, but in a different dimension.
Great,
He's not
we're getting even
temporal.
closer. Okay, so you believe, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, that Jesus always had a body then.
Now that's an interesting question. So at the moment of creation, right, he was the firstborn of creation,
Mhm.
then he would have been the reflection of the unknowable in the knowable. Does that make sense?
So what that means is that there was a moment in time where he did not exist, and then he came into existence, which means he was created. Can God be created?
Well, if you're talking about time, time can only be inside the creation, right?
No, Jesus. Was
So
Jesus created?
so if you're talking about time, time is a created thing, right?
Nope, I'm not talking
So
about time, I'm talking about Jesus. Was Jesus created?
well, the idea is that Jesus was with God before the creation. That's not a time thing.
Okay, so
Doesn't
then there
involve time.
couldn't be a moment where Jesus came into existence then. He can't be the first of creation if he always existed.
He existed with the Father, but once creation was created, he could have been the first one created. So,
Well, he couldn't have been
are you
created
familiar
if
with
he
the Gateway?
pre-existed.
Are you familiar with the Gateway Project? Have you heard that
No,
or read that white
that
paper?
doesn't fix the problem. He can't be created if he always existed. Things that always exist don't get created.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Then he always existed.
Okay,
The
so then
reflection of the
he's not the first of creation. So Jesus's body always existed, which is fine. You can believe that. You can believe that there's the Father, who is a spirit, the Holy Spirit, oddly enough, is a spirit, and then Jesus's body, and all 3 of them always existed. Now, the problem that I think this presents is that if Jesus has a physical body, then we have to contend with the fact that Jesus' physical body has always been within space and time, because physical things always take up space time, which means God didn't create space or time. Space and time always existed. It pre-existed with God.
but that doesn't gel with our Big Bang theory and the creation of the universe.
Well, the Big Bang Theory
There is
doesn't
a
say
moment
that
of
there
creation.
was an instant point where nothing gave rise to something. The Big Bang has nothing to say about that. So, for example, in my worldview, the universe always existed, as did time and space.
Right. So that kind of lines up with the stuff that James Webb is figuring out. There are much further fully formed galaxies farther out than we ever thought they should be, right? That it's
I
always
mean,
been
that's
there.
part
It's
of it.
returned.
I think that while that's true, I think people are making too much of it. For example, like we're finding that, like, based on what we're finding from the galaxies, that the universe might be only like 5% older than what we thought. It's not that big of a deal. But that being said, my point is, like, this idea that there was once just God, and then God spoke space, time, and matter into existence. Well, that doesn't really work if Jesus has an eternal physical body. It would be much better in that worldview, which, to be sure, I think is way more sensible than the Trinity, to think that God did always have a physical existence, always lived in time, always lived in space, and he didn't speak space, time, and matter into existence. In fact, that's not even in the Bible. This is just stuff that Christians feel compelled to hold on to because they learned it from Greek philosophy, but none of this is really in the Bible. This is like the poison that Thomas Aquinas forced on people.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's scholars that talk about Genesis 1:1, where that verse may say the earth became formless and void instead of
Well,
and God created, right?
I think the best scholarship on Genesis 1:1, which we're finding more and more in the new Bibles, like the NRSV and the NABRE, or like the Jewish Publication Society, where it gets translated rather than saying "in the beginning," which is not proper Hebrew grammar. It doesn't act like a better sheet doesn't mean "in the beginning." A better translation would be when began or when beginning, but that's only because we haven't included the subject yet, which is God. So it'd be when God began to create. So Bereshit bara Elohim would be when God began to create. It's not a statement of like nothing into something. It's not a creation ex nihilo. It's not really what they conceived of. That's something that later people conceived of. Like once we got this Greek notion of like this immaterial deity that existed, transcendentally without any space, time, or matter, and then spoke it all into existence. That's not really in the Hebrew text. We like Christians superimposed that onto the text. So all that being said, I think it makes more sense to believe that Jesus always had a body, and that they always lived within space and time. But here's the other thing I would point out, though. The other weird thing about this view of the Trinity is that it's weird that the model of the Trinity, typically what a lot of people believe, is that it models the human body. You've got a mind, a soul, and a body. But it doesn't really work out that well with God, because God is basically like three minds. So there's three minds, and there's one body, and then there's two spirits. So it's not really all that analogous, and it's kind of a weird thing to think about. Like, why does a spirit have a spirit? Like, if God is a spirit, then I don't understand why God as a spirit has a spirit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't like that one either. But I want to thank you for your time. It's probably what, midnight where you are?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
you've been so gracious and you've been patient. Don't roast me too hard if you ever post a thumbnail. I've had a
I
really
won't.
good time talking with you.
I already wrote down a note here, said good deconstruction talk. I listed what we talked about, and I wrote down that you were nice. So,
Very cool. Well, thank
no
you so
worries.
much. It's been a pleasure. I was hoping that I'd get a chance to talk with you about 3 days ago, and then I come in and I see your live live stream going on, and so I figured, why that, what the heck? You're intelligent, you're fascinating, your crew has great questions, and yeah, I don't know
We're
why God
smart.
just didn't zap me into heaven off the bat, but bro, I've seen some shit. Basically, you're telling me I need to get on some medication, but even to this day, I have friends will tell me, "Man, I saw this thing and I don't know what it means," and then we'll hang out, and then it reveals itself. So there are
Fair enough.
synchronicities in this weird place we find ourselves, and I just want to encourage you, keep searching for truth, and God bless. Be nice to these guys.
All right, I will. Thanks, Todd. Have a great one.